I'm on the wrong side and you're on the right side.
Hi, everybody. Ever been right? Ever been wrong? Ever want to convince people that you're right? You don't want to convince people you're wrong. But what makes us right or wrong? Is there a right or wrong? We're going to talk about this in this episode. Two Chaps, Many Cultures. It's Monday, episode 86. Welcome back.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿cómo se dice? A happy Dia de los Muertos to everyone who's watching.
Very good, very good. Yeah.
I hope it's happy. I hope it's joyful. Is it joyful? I was told over the weekend that Dia de los Muertos is, despite what some Anglo-Saxon European spin we may have put on it, it's nothing gory. It's not about sadness and death worship. It's about celebrating the life of those who have lived it in full.
Yeah.
So there we go.
That's how
and
we
for
should
us Catholic choir boys, what do we call this day?
All Saints Day. Yeah.
All Souls, All Saints, All Souls.
All Souls, which was All Souls. I don't know. All Souls.
I think All Souls was November 2nd. I don't want to be right or wrong about it. It doesn't really matter, right?
Well, and if I really wanted to stand on my high horse and convince you that I'm right, I would probably do it. And at the expense of probably being happy. And that's what we want to talk about today. We hear a little bit about of what is right and what is wrong in society, and we're not going to get on the moral high horses here. This is not something that we're trying to judge people on their the way they live their life. But there are certain things, behaviours, ways that we relate to each other, ways that people turn up in the world, and that is driven sometimes, or maybe predominantly, by the culture they were brought up in, the beliefs they were raised with. And that could be informed by things like religion and social norms. So when you are confronted, of course, with people that do things a different way, that is not the same as you, there might be the opportunity or the possibility that you might think that that is wrong. We're here to tell you that in many cases, competency calls on us to maybe take a step back and say, well, maybe what I'm seeing is not so much wrong for them. It's just the way they do it, but it's not the way that I'm used to doing it. So, it gets far more complicated than that. We probably haven't enough time in this to talk about that, but that's basically essentially what we want to touch on today.
Plus, where I come from, don't have high horses. Our horses are real small. maybe that's why
that's just wrong.
Seriously, because I remember I'm not a horse person. I'm not an equestrian or so. So when I grew up, I grew up in near the farmland, right? So a lot of cow pastures and the occasional horse, and the horses we have in our part of Europe are fairly small, and they're work horses. They're not these parade horses that you take that you show off. They're like you hide them in the stables and get them out when they need to get the job done. So yeah. I think even though that may appear funny, I think where I come from, putting ourselves on high horses is something that is frowned upon in my neck of the woods. And I know it's quite similar in your culture where you come from, right? You don't put yourself on a pedestal or you hop on that high horse for fear of being yanked down, right?
Yeah, well, you could be. And when it comes to, the view of right or wrong, when we want to argue our point, we'll probably be one of the best on the face of the planet to do it. We'll get very passionate about something. And obviously in certain circumstances that cannot turn out well. I mean, that's not, I wouldn't say that that's about the getting on a, you know, I guess getting on a high horse is different than bloviating and talking as if you're the expert on it. Sometimes it is that we have a belief. We believe something inherently. It's something that we've possibly had a little bit of exposure to. Therefore, what we've seen works for us. And then when we see something that perhaps is an alternative point of view, how much do we dig our heels in? As I said at the start, do we want to be right or do we want to be happy? I find now, I mean, maybe it's something that comes with age, maybe it does, but I'm actually the happiest when I'm wrong, because I live in a world that is ostensibly driven by challenging the norms, and those norms are across cultures. Again, I said, we're not talking about moral either. There are certain humanistic things that we could probably all agree on that even in some cultures are not respected from our point of view. And we might say that we take action as a global community to push back against those. We're not getting into those. That's a different topic for people that are a lot smarter than us. But I think that just ostensibly the right way to do things is not necessarily the right way for another person. And that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different. And the opportunity, what I find is that why I'm happy when I'm wrong is that oftentimes when I've actually taken the step back and said and asked that person, so from your point of view, why is that right for you? I've found something that I can use. This is a very freeing way to live your life. And I've repeated that on this show many times. The freedom to have that ability to see something from a different point of view and take an opportunity in it is something that is hard to explain to somebody that's so entrenched in their ideas.
You said a word that tipped a domino for me, and the word is belief. People believe in things, and their beliefs determine whether they find something wrong or right. And my favorite definition of the word belief is a feeling of certainty. People feel certain of something because they have collected points of evidence that support that belief. There's this metaphor of belief being a table. So the belief is the tabletop, and the tabletop will only stand up if there's enough solid legs underneath it that hold it up. So imagine you need at least 3 legs to hold up that belief table. And the more legs you can put under that belief table, the more robust, the more unshakable, literally, that belief becomes. So the more points of evidence we have under a belief table, the more certainty we develop about something being right or wrong, which makes these deeply rooted beliefs hard to change. And that's why it's often hard for us as humans. We're hardwired that way. Once we solidly believe in something, whether it's this way or that way, it's hard for us to change our minds unless we are open to receiving evidence that contradicts the evidence that we've been collecting over years, right? And we've learned one thing in the last couple of years with the echo chambers in which many of us live is that we have developed ways to filter out evidence that does not support the belief that we already hold so dear. So we only allow evidence to reach our conscious or subconscious mind that aligns with what we already have collected. So it's really challenging for us, the way our brains work and the way we consume information in this present day and age, to alter a belief, modify a belief. And I agree with you, Brett. I am happy to be wrong if being wrong is presented to me in a way that I can get to it, right? And the question that I ask myself is, am I allowing the information that might potentially contradict my beliefs? Is that information even reaching me? Is it reaching you, Brett?
You know, I obviously we do a little bit of social media. We're on social media here, of course, you know, and I'm fascinated by this. You know, cut and paste is a wonderful thing when you have documents you're working on because it saves you a lot of time. cut and paste doesn't work so well. I think cut and paste should be against the rules. It should be ruled out as wrong in social media.
Ooh.
That may be a bold statement, but it's like people will just cut and paste the most strangely interesting things. I'm going to say not wrong, at the expense of actually writing their own cogent thoughts and reflections. And that's it. It is just like you said, they see another potential leg for their table that they can put under there, even if that table, wasn't rickety in the first place, right? They're trying to make other people believe in their point of view using somebody else's anecdotal, secondhand, butchers, dog walkers, babysitters, son-in-laws view. That, I mean, we did exercises like this when we were kids about how one message starts at one end of the room, and each kid would tell the story to each other. We did that in school. I went past that. And does that make me high and mighty and right in that? It's just that why are we going back to that to prove ourselves right? In fact, does it make you feel better? Does it make you feel better? Again, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I would prefer happiness. I would prefer, at least, happiness doesn't mean all happy all the time. Happiness means discomfort. Happiness for me means that I'm able to be put in a situation of where I'm stretching my boundaries. That's happy for me. So again, I tend to, and I give up this bias, I tend to disengage with people who are just so driven by what they believe because they want to be right instead of happy.
Yes, and still we're confronted, I think we're confronted, especially in our professional lives, you and I, we're confronted with facilitating or assisting people in their journey to accepting different truths than those that they've been holding dear. So as we work with groups of people that we're not part of, who hold different beliefs than we do, we will inevitably come to that crossroad where we decide, is this right or is this wrong? Do I judge? I feel compelled to judge it either way. I'm compelled to give it a white or black label or a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it might be. And the suspension of judgment is, I've found, one of the hardest things to do, because our brains are hardwired. I'm repeating myself. Our brains are hardwired to make these snap judgments because that keeps us safe. We've learned over the thousands of years of evolution that if there is an opportunity or a threat, that we need to decide, is this good for me? Is this not good for me? Do I engage or do I run away? So we jump to these conclusions frequently, and suspending that and looking at it from different angles before we make up our minds is a tough thing to do. And yet it is, I think, hugely important if we want to be successful in working with people who are different from us, who come from different backgrounds. Though those categories, right and wrong, I think they need to take a backseat. And then when I say they need to, I'm making a presupposition that this is necessary. However, if we succeed in suspending that judgment, if we successfully put the right or wrong categories in the backseat and allow, instead of black and white, allow for variations of gray and say, what else is there? Could this apply in this context, or is this good or bad in this context, and maybe differently in that context? Becoming aware of the nuance, the bandwidth of nuance that is at our disposal. I think, as you said earlier, that's liberating. That is something that fills me with joy to see, oh, wait, there's something that I have missed before, but that adds to my life experience. But it's somehow we found ourselves, especially in North America and Western Europe, we found ourselves in societies where the nuance seems not to matter as much anymore as those bipolar opposites that we cling on to for dear life.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. No, I think it's a good, it's always going to be a constant progression. But I mean, through stories, if you've got, we've had enough stories in business where we can bring anecdotes, even anecdotes from clients. I mean, this is where we get our material from. We're not making this stuff up. These are actually real people, right? We might protect the names of the guilty and innocent, but what we do is we draw on these stories, and I have this all the time where we're pretty much able to draw on a story and say, here's a situation where somebody did something different than what you're describing, and it turned out that it came out pretty well when it was matched with some of the best things that you think of. That's a different conversation than saying, you're wrong, I'm going to tell you why. That's a different conversation. This is a conversation that invites people to open their mind and their hearts, right? That to a different way of thinking, and the proof. Again, we're looking for something to hold up that table, right? The proof that says stretching your comfort zone. It's going to be difficult in some cases, but it actually, over many millennium that the human beings have survived, things have worked out pretty well. I think we're at a stage in the world that, strange enough, in the historical context, is one of the most peaceful times in human history. And people might not think that, but I mean, you didn't want to go back and live in the medieval ages, right? Where so let's affirm what we've got. Let's affirm the positive of the human spirit and the ability to get through this type of one-sided way of looking things. And, hopefully that using that and practicing that locally, right? Practicing that in your business world with people, if you're in another country or working with people from different cultures, is a great place to start, because then you find yourself, well, maybe I can turn that into changing or adapting my political views to be something that's a little bit more outgoing and accepting. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we find the gray zones? How do we allow for nuance? What are some of the tips you give your clients, the people that you work with, when you recognize that they're defaulting to their preset value system? How do you invite people to open up to the idea of maybe there's an alternative truth that could, well, let me rephrase it. Alternative truth is a term that has been tainted. Right. Maybe there's another way of looking at this that will serve you.
Right. Well, we use assessment tools. And again, we're always saying that assessment tools are not the be-all and end-all, but they are a great start of conversation. So much information out there that is being validated and researched and talked about and proven to work as a general framework, as a starting point for them to approach another culture's way of thinking. And then, of course, there's no substitute for the actual experience of sitting somebody down from that other culture and say, listen, I read that from your culture, your tendency may be to work in this particular way, or you may have this approach to a task, or you may have this approach to doing the task. So, and then that not only gives you the opportunity to learn, but it also gives them the opportunity for you to then share back what you see as maybe something that's worked for you in the past. So then, again, as we've always say, the bridging of I always say that when the gaps exist, there's great opportunity, because there's somewhere in the middle where it really comes together and makes a great cake, right, in the recipe.
I had this experience yet again this morning. We had another session with this global team that I mentioned in early episodes, people in Europe, in North America, and in India. And they were tasked, this diverse group was tasked to write out value cards for their joint organization. So a diverse group had to come up with ideas that should apply across the board. And the way they phrased it, the way they approached the topic was interesting, because the people from India phrased it in this certain way, and the people from North America in that way. Both were aiming for the same goal, so to say. However, how they looked at it was from two different angles, and that's how they phrased it differently. And both were on the right tracks, as they or both were in agreement. However, it took somebody like a third neutral party, in this case me as the facilitator, to make them aware that these were not right or wrong positions, that they were actually very similar positions, simply phrased from a different mindset and approaching it from a different angle. And at first they were really trapped in their difference until I was able, in this case, to take their blindness off and say, hey, how about you look at it this way? Would you be okay to look at it through this lens? And how does this look like now? And then they all were like, oh, so yeah, we're basically in agreement then. Okay, yeah, we can work with this, right? So what started off as a no, I'm right, no, you're wrong position eventually morphed into, oh, if we tweak it here a little bit and there a little bit, then the differences are minuscule, and actually what we have in common is a broader truth that applies to all of us. That was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and this brings into play why it's great to have a facilitator that's kind of outside and separated from the process.
Yeah.
How often do we hear we have people that come to us and say, I've worked with these people for years. I know them. I know what they do. And I say, but do you always agree with it? No, it drives me crazy. People are nuts, right? And I go, well, so you actually have experience, but you don't know why it's frustrating you. And perhaps can we work on the underlying reasons why they do things differently? Let's learn that. And also their perspective about how you do things. And maybe all that great experience you've had, you can turn into a deeper knowledge base to now make it easier for you not to get so frustrated. Not to say we're going to take frustration totally out of it, but the ability to build on somebody's already great experience working with a specific another culture where they say, yeah, I've worked with them forever. I know what they're like, right? Sometimes in a dismissive way to say, yeah, they're wrong, but no, yeah, they're not. They're from their perspective, you're wrong. So, no,
you're wrong, Brett.
That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's basically not always questioning what we know, right? And say, okay, on the surface we might know, but now let's dig underneath and say, well, how can we use the point of view from the people we're going to be work with as a real good tool for connecting with each other. And I think, again, like you said, that's such a powerful aha moment for people because we see it so often, is that sometimes participants are a little disengaged at the start. They go, I don't really need this. I'm ticking a box. My company says I have to do it. And then they get into the material and they go, oh, wow, this is interesting, right? It's really interesting. And it's a pure human experience of now having a deeper understanding. It's like discovering your partner again for the new, in a new sense. And I think that's a really great experience. We get a little bit preachy about this because we really truly believe in the human side of it, right? It's more than just the business. It is business, and it does have an effect on the way commerce works. But deep down, what better way to use the connectedness of the human spirit to bring it together? I think it's great.
And you're right about that.
Thank you, sir. Oh, you 88%. All right. Well, that's it. Another episode. Another good week coming up with some guests and some great topics. Thank you again for everybody joining and listening. Put your comments and questions in the chat boxes or whatever the social media platform that you are finding us on. LinkedIn now, of course, we're switching over here. We're only allowed to stream to one LinkedIn at a time, so we're switching off between Christian and I. Doesn't matter, we're both as important as each other. Is that right?
If you say so.
So, you're going to be like that now. You're going to be,
I'm sure you're right about that.
The best way to argue with an idiot is tell him he's right and walk away. That's what it is. Yeah. You believe what you want to believe, right?
And also, if you're watching us and you are in the United States, and if you are a citizen with the right to vote, feel encouraged, please. If you haven't done so already, you have today, if there's still early voting in your part of the United States. And then tomorrow is election day, tomorrow being November 3rd, as today is November 2nd, All Souls, remember. So do vote, people. And as you think about how you vote, right or wrong, you will find out whether your vote was right or wrong. However, ask yourself, if you think what your candidates have done in the past, if that was always right or wrong, make sure you look at the nuance instead of just the black and white. There might be more truths hidden in between those two extremes.
That's right. And as we always say, it is your right to vote, and that ain't wrong.
Oh, nice.
See you later, everybody.
Two Chaps, Many Cultures. See you again tomorrow.
Bye.